They thought betraying you would break you, but here's what they never expected. They broke the only bridge that kept them from drowning in their own behavior. They didn't just lose you, they lost the last person who protected them from themselves. Stay with me for a few minutes because I'm about to show you the psychological chain reaction that destroys a narcissist the moment you stop giving them access to your life. This isn't revenge, it's nature, it's human behavior, it's consequences. If you're listening right now and you've ever been betrayed by someone who thought they outsmarted you, I want you to comment one word: done. Done with justifying, done with explaining, done with carrying people who would never carry you. Engage so we can push this message to others who need it. Betrayal feels like a victory to a narcissist because they think emotional damage equals dominance. They believe walking away, cheating, lying, or discarding you is a power move. In their mind, betrayal proves superiority. They imagine you on the floor, broken, confused, questioning your worth. They think they just proved they were always above you. But what actually happened is the opposite. What they called a win was the start of a collapse. When they betray you, they remove the stabilizing force from their life without realizing it. You were the structure that made them look stable. You were the emotional resource that made them seem human. They used your empathy as a mask to cover their lack of empathy. They used your loyalty to appear trustworthy. They never understood that the value they had wasn't their personality. It was their connection to you. Betrayal blinds them to the truth because ego talks louder than logic. Ego tells them nothing can go wrong. Ego tells them there are 1,000 versions of you waiting. Ego tells them they are irreplaceable. They don't see that betrayal doesn't give them freedom. It removes protection. They just eliminated the person who translated the world for them. You handled emotions they couldn't process. You softened their rough edges in social settings. You gave context to situations they didn't understand. Every time they reacted impulsively, you were the buffer. Every time they burned a bridge, you built one. When they betrayed you, they celebrated burning the only bridge that kept them in the civilized world. They don't know how to navigate reality alone because reality requires accountability. Reality requires consistency. Betrayal sets a trap because it proves something they can't accept. Their belief that they are untouchable is a fantasy. The illusion of victory lasts until they need what you used to provide. And when that moment comes, the win they bragged about starts to look like the biggest loss they ever engineered. Che. Illusion they celebrated starts to feel like a cage. They thought betrayal made them powerful, but all it did was expose the power they never actually had. When a narcissist loses you, your absence becomes their punishment, though they rarely recognize it immediately. They are so focused on the perceived victory of betrayal that they never anticipate the silent consequences waiting for them. You were more than just someone in their life. You were a stabilizing force, an emotional ballast, a reference point that kept their chaos manageable. Once you step away, all of that disappears. Suddenly, they are alone with the consequences of their actions, facing a reality where the support they once took for granted is gone. They may try to fill the void with new people, distractions, or manipulations, but nothing can replicate the presence, patience, and understanding you provided. Each day without your influence slowly erodes the facade they relied on. Their ego, which thrived on control and admiration, begins to feel pressure it has no way to release. The people who once tolerated or admired their charm now see cracks they can't ignore. Their attempts to maintain appearances feel hollow because the one person who understood their rhythm, their strategy, their needs is gone. You don't have to act, you don't have to confront them. Your absence alone triggers self reflection they hate, exposing the gap between who they want to be and who they actually are. Every decision that once seemed clever now feels isolating. Every manipulation that once worked starts to lose its effect. And most of all, the quiet emptiness reminds them that the life they thought they were controlling is now just a series of missed opportunities and regrets. Your absence becomes a mirror they can't shatter, a punishment wrapped in silence, showing them the consequences of betraying someone who truly mattered. The damage isn't immediate, flashy, or loud. It's quiet, methodical, and deeply personal, gnawing at their ego until they are forced to reckon with the cost of their own choices. When a narcissist loses access to your empathy, it exposes the weakness they've always tried to hide. They rely on other people's emotions like fuel. Your understanding, patience, and compassion were the power source keeping them running. Without it, they start to feel the weight of themselves in a way they've never experienced. Suddenly, there's no one to smooth over their mistakes, no one to excuse their behavior, no one to validate the false version of themselves they present to the world. Every flaw, every insecurity, every selfish impulse becomes harder to conceal because the buffer that used to absorb it is gone. They might try to convince themselves it's fine, that empathy is weakness anyway, but deep down, they know the truth. They've lost the one thing that made them function socially and emotionally without consequences. And here's the trap they never saw coming. Empathy isn't just about soft feelings. It's about guidance, calibration, and subtle corrections. You helped them navigate life in ways they couldn't manage alone, whether they realized it or not. With that gone, they are left exposed, forced to face situations they previously manipulated or avoided, and every failure, every misstep, every social misjudgment starts stacking up. They scramble to replace you, but replacements are never the same. People can imitate empathy, but they can't replicate the bond you had, the intuitive understanding that kept them afloat. The absence highlights not just your value, but their dependency, making it painfully clear that they were never fully self-sufficient. They may attempt to deflect, manipulate, or attack, but each effort is weakened because it no longer has the emotional infrastructure they depended on, you. And so, slowly, invisibly, their life begins to unravel in ways they never anticipated, all because the one person they thought they could use without consequence finally stepped away, leaving them face to face with their own inadequacy. When a narcissist betrays you, the cracks in their reputation start quietly but inevitably. At first, it's subtle, small whispers, sideways glances, people noticing patterns they hadn't before. They rely on charm, manipulation, and selective truths to maintain an image, and your presence often acted as a veil, smoothing over inconsistencies and lending credibility to their persona. Once you're gone, the veil lifts. People begin to see the repeated patterns, the lies, the broken promises, the self-centered behavior that used to be masked by your loyalty or patience. Every story they tell about themselves begins to face scrutiny because you are no longer there to corroborate, to soften, or to validate. Friends, colleagues, or acquaintances who once admired them start noticing the mismatch between words and actions. The charisma that once dazzled starts to falter under the weight of observation, and their influence begins to erode. Unlike you, who grew stronger in your absence, their image begins to decay. Attempts to control perception through manipulation or charm now feel forced and obvious because there's no longer a stabilizing anchor to make it believable. Their social credibility, which they assumed was permanent, start slipping away piece by piece. They may try to recover, to explain, or to rewrite history, but the damage is cumulative. Each new interaction reveals more inconsistencies, more contradictions, and more evidence of who they really are. The people around them may not confront them directly, but the whispers grow louder, and the reputation they built on deception and exploitation starts to rot from within. The cruel irony is that the very act of betraying you, the act they thought would strengthen them, becomes the instrument of their downfall. They believed they could discard what they didn't need, only to find that what they discarded was exactly what kept their world intact. Their betrayal becomes the catalyst for their own unraveling, and no amount of charm, lies, or manipulation can fully restore the credibility that once came effortlessly when you were there. When a narcissist betrays you, the consequences often come back to haunt them because their own tactics become the trap they cannot escape. They manipulate, deceive, and control with precision, believing that every action is calculated for their gain. But every lie, every exploit, and every betrayal carries a cost, one they rarely anticipate. The same strategies they use to dominate, influence, and bend reality to their will eventually turn against them. Each manipulation leaves traces, relationships fractured, trust eroded, and credibility damaged. They may move on quickly, thinking the world will reset itself, but life has a way of revealing patterns. People notice, stories converge, and reputations begin to crack. The cunning schemes that once protected them become cages. Opportunities they counted on slip through their fingers because their reliability is questioned and their charm no longer carries the weight it once did. They try to outmaneuver consequences, but the very methods that gave them control now amplify their losses. Every discarded relationship, every broken promise, every act of betrayal accumulates like a debt they cannot repay. They are trapped in a cycle of their own making, seeking influence while facing the fallout of manipulation, craving admiration while dealing with the erosion of trust, wanting power while losing allies. In essence, the battlefield they created for others to fight on becomes the very arena where they lose. They thought betrayal was a shortcut to dominance, but it is, in fact, a road to self-destruction. The irony is stark. Their brilliance in manipulation is matched only by the inevitability of their collapse. What they believe to be clever tactics designed to control others ends up controlling them. The freedom they sought through betrayal becomes the prison of their own making, and the life they tried to secure by undermining others begins to crumble under the weight of consequences they never foresaw. In their quest to dominate, they underestimated the very real cost of their actions, the cost that eventually destroys the life they thought they were strengthening. When you rise after being betrayed, it highlights the stagnation of the narcissist, turning their betrayal into a mirror of their own failure. They expect you to crumble, to dwell on the pain, to replay the betrayal endlessly in a way that fuels their ego. Instead, you grow. Every step forward you take, every success, every moment of composure, every boundary you enforce exposes the reality they can't face. Their actions didn't break you. They revealed their own limitations. They become painfully aware that while they invested energy in manipulation and control, you invested energy in yourself. Your evolution contrasts sharply with their stagnation, and that contrast is unbearable for them. They watch silently as you rebuild, as your life becomes richer, more stable. and more fulfilling, while they remain trapped in the patterns that led them to betray you in the first place. They begin to realize that the power they thought they had was never about dominance. It was about temporary control, and control has a shelf life. It fades when you refuse to be a participant in their drama. Every achievement of yours, no matter how small, becomes a reminder of their own failure to sustain meaningful connections. Every moment they hoped would humiliate you instead illuminates their inadequacies, leaving them frustrated and powerless. They might try to regain control, to reinsert themselves into your life, or to undermine you subtly, but the damage is already done. You are no longer available as an emotional resource, and your growth stands as a permanent record of what they lost. Not just you, but the chance to evolve themselves. The very act they believed would cement their superiority becomes the measure of their downfall. Your rise doesn't just affirm your resilience, it exposes the emptiness of their betrayal. They are left watching a life they cannot touch, a success they cannot replicate, and a person they underestimated completely. Their betrayal becomes a catalyst for your triumph, and the more you flourish, the more they confront the reality that what they tried to destroy has now surpassed them entirely. When a narcissist betrays you, they feel the loss intensely, but their ego will never let them admit it. They don't apologize, they don't reach out, and they certainly don't acknowledge the pain they caused. What they experience is regret without ownership, a gnawing awareness that something valuable has been removed from their life, coupled with the pride and defensiveness that prevent them from admitting fault. They replay the events in their mind, wondering why the outcome isn't what they expected, why the control they assumed would be absolute slipped through their fingers. The frustration builds because they cannot confront the truth. They were dependent on you, and now that dependency is exposed. They might rationalize their behavior, blame circumstances, or vilify you to preserve their self-image, but none of it changes the reality that they miscalculated. The sense of loss is private, silent, and corrosive. They feel the absence of your loyalty, your understanding, and the subtle power you held, yet they cannot publicly acknowledge it without shattering the carefully constructed ego mask. This creates a psychological tension that is exhausting and inescapable. They are forced to live with the consequences of their betrayal without the release of apology or reconciliation. Every time they attempt to assert control elsewhere, they are reminded of the gap left by your absence. They may try to replace you, but no one fits the role they lost because it wasn't a role. It was a bond, a connection they exploited but secretly relied upon. The punishment isn't immediate or dramatic. It is the constant, unspoken reminder that they acted recklessly, burned a bridge, and lost access to something they underestimated. They live with the tension of wanting what they cannot have and pretending it doesn't matter. Their life continues, but beneath the surface, the betrayal reverberates as a private torment, a lesson they can neither admit nor undo. The very act they celebrated as empowerment becomes the source of enduring frustration, highlighting the deep cost